Special Operations Training Detachment, SOD West, Burrow Team. Coming at you from NTC, Off the Radar.
This is Off the Radar. I'm Captain Weston Rich, an observer coach trainer for the Green Berets at the National Training Center. Welcome back to our discussion with Spencer, Mike, and Andrew. This is the third part where we talk to the team leadership from Psychological Operations, Civil Affairs, and Special Forces that recently executed operations as REDSOF at the National Training Center. In the last episode, we talked about how the cross-functional team works and about integrating with the conventional force. If you haven't heard that one, please go back and give that a listen. In this episode, we hear the OC perspective on the cross-functional team integration within ARSOF and with the conventional force. And we hear tangible examples of how each ARSOF tribe plays a unique role in the ARSOF mission and how that impacts the conventional force. So I think you brought up some great points, one of which is commanders. I'll extend it to leadership because in the absence of a commander, an NCO is going to have to step up. So you have to be able to visualize and forecast that. And when you can and then communicate that, your lower echelon then has the latitude, understanding the commander's intent and understanding what risks they can and can't accept. Great comments. I'm going to actually make a question out to my OCs back there. Just final thoughts on the integration of these elements and how that went.
Yeah, so I guess I'll start off. So like I said earlier, the integration piece was awesome. And what we see a lot out here, not all the time are they lacking in that, but I think with you guys meeting each other prior to going to the LTP and you know whatever other events that you guys went to together, I think is huge because that's a lot of the parts that we don't see. Where maybe they meet one time beforehand, or maybe they don't. Maybe that correspondence is just over email, over the phone. And that's why I'm hoping with this whole coming together of everyone falling under whatever COCOM SF group that they're going to be under, it mitigates that. And it mitigates those issues with comms. It mitigates those issues with various equipment, because that is a tested thing out here that can be a huge failure point. Is you're not getting that integration piece before you come out. And we've all been on deployments where you hit the ground and that's the first time you're ever meeting anybody, and now you're trying to, you know, figure out who that person is, how they like things done, you know, all of that, especially if you're working for them. And that can be a huge hindrance to the overall mission. So I think you guys did a phenomenal job of, you know, throughout, but especially that beginning piece and linking up ahead of time and that full integration that took place before you guys got here. Set you guys up for even more success than you would have had.
Yep. Kind of along the same lines as Cody. I didn't know the train up that you guys went through prior to like meeting you guys out here. But seeing you from day one, like it's pretty evident that you guys had like a mutual respect for what each other's jobs are. And like, hey, this is your lane. I'm looking at you. Like, what do you have to say on this specific topic? Or like, we have this going on. PSYOP, like messaging, what can you provide us for the messaging to kind of get ahead of it, and then the aftermath and all that. Like very collaborative, very much respectful of each other's positions on this larger team, right? And then relying on one another to get the effects that you guys need. So I mean, in a nutshell, that's pretty much it. It's very evident from the outside looking in. Usually we have to coach like, hey, you know, what are they doing over here? Do you have an understanding of what they have going on? But here it's very much like it's just like that team of teams concept. You know, you guys are on it the whole time.
Yeah, awesome to hear from the OCs. You know, everyone's got their lane that they understand, but like we got to force each other to crosstalk and integrate. So moving on, talking about integration, you mentioned it briefly, Andrew. Integrating with the conventional force. For you guys, it was Black Horse and specifically Task Force Reaper. We don't need to go down about what Task Force Reaper is. We have that covered in a separate episode, but I'll just rehash it real fast. It's a sort of like a JOC planning cell that focuses on Intel and EW and IO specifically, mixing out, also fires. Those are the big pieces. They track maneuver, but they're not dictating the maneuver of the ground elements of the DTG or BTG that Black Horse is replicating. So, like, you mentioned that I believe you mentioned that you all went there at different times, integrated with them. So how effective was your integration with conventional force? And then you can touch on, hey, out in the field, we integrated at the company and platoon level as well, but like just broad brushstrokes on recommendations for integrating with Black Horse and a conventional force in general.
Yeah. Early and often. It's the same theme that we've had with what made the cross-functional team successful is we integrated with Black Horse very early. We were fortunate enough to have the Task Force Reaper OIC call in during the MDMP cycle, right?
Awesome.
Because we're hitting, just RFI overload, and it got to a point where I was just like, man, we're not going to be effective planning if we don't get these RFIs answered. So I'm going to go to like this Reaper, Task Force Reaper, and see what's going on there. Mm-hmm. And so that was paramount for us. I mean, once we kind of then understood what those guys brought to the table, and I will totally say they're like the mesh network for the brigade, right? Like to your point, they're not moving anything on the chessboard, but man, do they understand the chessboard better than anybody else. And they're thinking those 2 to 3 steps ahead.
Yeah.
As well as just like the assets that they had available. Whether it was ISR, whether it was, having CCTV in different cities, the EW jamming and locating, as well as just also seeing like their mill deception. And if you're tied into that, you really find that, I can get anywhere on this map as long as I, understand the risk that I take in certain areas, and then I put an asset against that to make sure that I can do that. So, yeah, absolute kudos to Captain Mark Dryfout and his team over there.
Yeah, it was pretty awesome. Did you guys get to brief in the Black Horse Combined Arms rehearsal?
Yeah, so we popped out there for their first one. And at that point in the game, though, we were working an operational target, which I'm sure we can probably touch on, a fuel depot sabotage. So we weren't really tied into their scheme of maneuver there. But what I will say, too, is, when we're looking at, like, hey, where is the actual good level of convergence between ARSOF and the conventional force?
Yeah.
It's those captains, man.
Yeah.
It's those company commanders tying in with a detachment commander, a CA team commander, a TPT commander. It was really cool. And it was a good like re-greening experience for me as well to go and see, one of my former peers in the infantry doing the Lord's work on the line and him talking me through like, hey, I got first platoon here, second platoon here. I could really use some help over here, or I can get you guys some guys over here. And then also to identifying that experience in terms of like, hey, what are GBs really if we're not force multipliers? Mm-hmm. And it's like, dude, in my training cycle, I haven't touched CQB and I'm about to do a complex urban defense. It's like too easy, dude. Let me get my Sephardic guys over here. You pull them off. That allows you to maintain your security posture, and we'll get them ready for the fight.
Yeah, get those dismounts in the fight.
I need to throw some kudos at Andrew, right? Because if anyone walks in your house, you start kicking over tables, and you're like, I'm the big dog here, you're not going to get a lot of leeway or favor in anyone's eyes. And just the way that he approached that situation with those relationships with Reaper right off the bat while we're planning led us into the door right away. He said, hey, this is kind of what I can do, what we can bring to the table. These are some of the effects that we can have. What is your guys' plan? Because I want to take my effects and mesh them best with yours. And just phrasing it that way, like, hey, you guys are overall in charge, right? We're just here to help you, but here's how I can help you best. Bought us immediately credibility. And then after the first couple missions, they're like, okay, yeah, you are exactly what you say you are. Yes, SOF is exactly what we need in this instant. And then any one of us could walk into Reaper, talk to Mark or talk to any of the NCOICs that are there and be like, hey, here's some effects that I'm trying to accomplish, but I don't have the resources or the assets in 1, 2, or 3. Is there anyone here that can help me get to these effects to meet your overall end state? And they're like, what do you need? Here you go. It's all yours for as long as you need it. You need trucks, you need vehicles, you need people. Like, yes, let's do it.
Eagle.
Right.
Yeah.
No,
Oh, yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so anyone who's listening, who's coming in, just that this is their house. They're allowing us to rent a couple rooms for the training rotation that we're here. And that really hit home for me when we were out doing a civil reconnaissance. And I was talking to the squad leader about the lay of the land and the city. And he basically said, yeah, I've defended this thing like 30 times the last 5 years that I've been here. It's like, all right, you know this way more than me. Let me pick your brain a little bit. Okay,
Yeah.
which structures are most important to you and why? And then that allows me to write an assessment. It allows me to like hand out the information to whoever needs it. But just utilizing those people and the relationships that you build right off the bat, like don't burn those to the ground.
Cody?
Yeah, so I think you touched on a good point there, right? As we've stated, earlier, SOF is no longer the main effort in a LISCO fight. So kind of sucking up that pride a little bit of after however many years of GWAT and SOF running the show and, we're the big dog in the room type thing, going back, swallowing a little bit of pride, going up and really interacting with those company commanders, those brigade commanders, and showcasing what you guys can do. And I think that's the big flop that we're trying to get here at NTC and JRTC is bringing guys back down to how we can support those large-scale combat operation fights in real-world scenario. Because when we do, heaven forbid if World War III did kick off, that would be something that we would be doing is, hey, we're here, this is your AO, but these are the things that we can provide. Help us help you get after those tasks. And I think we'll see a good shift coming forward if more people come out with that type of attitude.
Yeah. And if you develop that relationship and you get that mutual understanding, you're going to go out and be able to do the things that you signed up to do when you came to SOF, right? Versus if, the impression is you guys are just a bunch of cowboys, or I believe as 104 articulated as long-bearded freedom fighters. And then they don't understand what you're doing. They don't understand what you can do. Then you're not going to get the mission go.
Yeah.
Whereas if you come in there and you water the grass and they go, hey, actually I got a wicked problem that I cannot solve. And we're like, I am your wicked solution. You're gonna get to go out and do the cool things that you want to do, which I think is at this point we've been talking pretty conceptually. We should probably maybe actually talk about some specific stuff we did there.
But real quick, Spencer. So Task Force Reaper has an information operations officer. I don't know if you got the chance to meet him.
Yes.
Major Blix, and they do military deception. So like, did you guys have the ability to integrate with that? What was your take on their mil deception plan? And
so that was our key focus integrating into Task Force Reaper, is integrating with the IO regimental chief there, finding out what his objectives were for each phase, and then how do we nest under that as well, right? Because we're supporting that conventional unit. He is trying to achieve the same effects that we're trying to achieve. So nesting there wasn't a problem. And then finding out exactly what he wanted to do with deception. That way we could kind of cater our messaging to that, right? Like pulling population certain ways so that would enable his deception team to get on target and draw those forces somewhere, make that key decision maker, make the wrong move on that chessboard to play into the DTG's hand. So for him, we have the authorities that he doesn't have, right, as the PSYOP team. But he has access to the platforms. He knows the people that are at Task Force Reaper, and he can provide us resources, and that's what's integral, right?
Yeah, he's got the personnel and the resources, like you mentioned, and then knows the terrain.
Exactly. So if we ran into any problems getting with him, he could resolve that friction and help us get over that hump so that we could execute what we wanted to execute.
Awesome. So to Andrew's point, let's try to get like more of a tactical level, granular feel on what this integration across the tribes and conventional force like. Let's run through a mission. I don't know if it's the best example, but you mentioned the fuel depot mission. If you got a better example, like I'm all ears on. Hey, how'd the maneuver plan nest with the civil component and the information operations, and then overall, how did that plan nest with Black Horse?
Yeah, so taking it from the top and broad concept of the operation, right? We receive basically from lack of a better term, our SOF specific headquarters, which was more notional out here, right? But we got, hey, here's your target. It's 40 kilometers outside of the box, but it's a major fuel hub that's basically the Americans and the Bertunis have taken over, and that's what's fueling all of these ABCTs trying to, go and reestablish the international border. So you understand kind of, hey, this is an operational target that is best for SOF to be able to get. We're talking in the deep area with operational effects across about 3 brigades AO. So when we get that, right, if it had just been the ODA, we would have looked at that problem set completely different, particularly in terms of conducting our Carver analysis. It's like, how are we going to get there? And everything throughout that process, we would have just hit like question after question after question without really an intel asset to task against that, because the human intelligence assigned to that was pretty limited. But I did have somebody who did have access and placement, Mike.
Yeah, so CA has civil affairs has a few missions, and this is where SOF CA differs from Reserve CA. And I need to make sure that I'm very clear on this. I think, don't quote me on this, but we might be the only branch that has a reserve component that doesn't do what the SOF component does. We have a specific mission set that no one else does. That's why we're specifically selected and trained for it. And one of those things that we bring to bear is our connections. So we got this mission, we're doing mission analysis, and we have a reach back. And we called that reach back, and we said, hey, this is the target. This is what we're trying to do. How can you help us? And we sat on the phone with this subject matter expert for fuel depots for 2 hours. We took notes. He gave us things to look for when we go and do our critical infrastructure assessment. And we compiled all these notes. And we walked to the ODA and we're like, hey, here are our pre-assessment notes. And they look at us and they're like, holy crap, this is way better than anything that we even got from the white cell. Like technically, like their pack targeting package.
Yeah.
Our information was already better and we hadn't even gone to the location yet. Well, so then something that we do are critical infrastructure assessments, right? Some little civil reconnaissance. So we took a team out to this location and we confirmed and denied all the information that we had received from our subject matter expert.
Uncontested. They opened the doors for him. Said, hey, come on in here, take a look. What can we do better to make this thing run smoother, knowing that they were in there to figure out how to make it not run at all.
So by asking the right questions, using our training as SOF CA to make sure that this guy didn't know what we were actually trying to do, but we just wanted to know about your facility. And I had a list of questions to confirm or deny based on locations. So we went in there, we talked to the guy, we were there for 2 hours, just chatting him up, being friends. And one thing that comes from this that people don't realize is, and I think the OCs said it, this was the first time that we made such a good relationship with the person that ran the station that he gave us their desk phone and they said, hey, whatever you need help with, please call the phone and we'll help you. And so when it came time to conduct the mission, we called the desk phone, said, hey, can you turn the lights out for us? And the lady working the desk was like, okay, click. Hey, can you turn the cameras off for us too? Yeah, sure. Click. Hey, what are you seeing out there right now? Are there any people walking around other than you, like anyone else, like who's protecting this location? Where are their locations? And we got all that information and we just gave it over to the ODA. We're like, hey, here you guys go. What else do you need from us?
Oh, yeah. Can you leave the south gate unlocked? Sure thing.
Yeah, sure thing. Yep. Let me walk out there and unlock it for you right now. Yep, you're good to go. It's unlocked.
All right. How did PSYOP get in on this?
So there was already a narrative of fuel shortages in the region, right? People were complaining. The population was all over all the social media platforms, and there was various articles talking about the rolling blackouts and people not being able to fuel their cars. So we started to pin that on the U.S. sucking up all the fuel. That's what we wanted to do. We wanted to just tie it. I think we even had like a hashtag, free our fuel, I think was the hashtag we used. So when it came time that we knew time on target for the mission, we knew what we were going to do. So we were thinking of what was going to happen before that. So we didn't want to highlight any messaging directly towards the Kinder Morgan plant pre-mission, but post-mission, we wanted to have a protest. We wanted to stage a protest at Kinder Morgan, right? Not not putting out what we were going to do, but just a protest in general that at Kinder Morgan, where we knew the U.S. was, that's where your fuel is, go protest that. But through our planning, we identified, hey, after the strike, those people are going to be there protesting. The U.S. won't have access to the facility because of the protesters, and it'll delay their ability to repair and actually fuel their vehicles strategically. So that's what we were thinking. And then after the mission, we immediately had radio messages and newspapers prepared to go out that tied it to U.S. negligence at the fuel facility that destroyed your fuel. And again, another example of, this corrupt government allowing the U.S. to just suck up your fuel and destroy your facilities.
Oh, yeah.
And then pre-mission too, right? Like we identified all right, hey, what's our most likely course of action for the enemy, right? It's a big boom goes off at this fuel depot, and then the police are going to come and they're going to check that out. And so we had the PSYOP guys on the ground be like, oh, too easy. Right before, 45 minutes before your time on target, we're going to just flood the police with their phone lines as well as on social media. Like, there's rioting over here. I'm getting rubbed at gunpoint. Hey, there's, just everything that would tie up the police. So their response time was entirely degraded. So when you look at actually getting the GBs on target to do the sabotage, that came because CA went in there, told us exactly what we were going to hit, left the door unlocked for us, and turned the lights off as soon as my guys made breach. And then, oh yeah, we're pulling away the police, so now you guys have a little more time to get off the X. And then afterwards, when we're all safe, hey, we're going to set off a protest that then pushes back that, reconstitution of an operational asset another 24 to 48 hours back.
Yep.
One thing, too, that no one really thinks about in the layered effect is my guys had been there. We'd seen the location. We'd seen the terrain. We know high avenues of approach. And so the ODA, hey, you guys are driving. So our guys drove them to the target. They positioned the vehicles where they needed to pick up, and then my guys drove them back because we had already seen it. We'd seen it in the middle of the day. We had the routes in our head. There's only so much you can see on a map overlay, but once you're down there on the ground, you know where the WADI systems are, best place to park the truck. You kind of know the patterns of life, which is something that we gather. And then we did such a good job at nesting all of our effects from all three branches that they had a video of us on the objective, and we spun the narrative so well that everyone on social media is like, nope, the Americans are lying. That wasn't what they said it was happening, because we controlled it from phase 0 to when we were planning to 3 days after the strike the entire time. And we owned that operation based on all of us leaning together, being like, this is what we need to have accomplished. What do we need to do to get there?
All right. So how did all that get packaged up and sold to Black Horse as look how wonderful we are?
I mean, I think when we said, hey, these guys aren't going to be able to refuel for 72 hours, they're basically going to run out of fuel. The next time that they set up their flot and they're all sitting there waiting for FARP, they have 72 hours before they can move again. They were like, and obviously that didn't actually affect the RTU. This is kind of an isolated soft lane. But for them to understand, whoa, you guys just halted not just one, but potentially 3 brigades for 72 hours. They were on board. And that's kind of when the keys to the kingdom opened up. And then too, the important thing is that wasn't isolated. And this is probably will drive the narrative for the rest. It's we took advantage of that on the next thing, right? Because the next thing that we did as a team is we knew that the U.S. brigade had to pass the city of Punjab. And we already knew the people in Punjab were upset and that they didn't have any fuel. So Spencer and his guys ginned up a leaflet packet. You want to talk about that, Spencer? Because it was the most wicked, hideous idea, and I loved every second of it.
Yeah. So we were thinking, how can we use that and also mobilize the population against the BCT and disrupt their freedom of maneuver, right? So we came up with this fuel voucher. It was very simple. It had an American flag, a First ID logo on it, and it said redeemable for 5 liters of free fuel. Go to your nearest U.S. soldier to redeem it. So we coordinate with the SOT-D, with our higher headquarters for the leaflet drop. We execute the leaflet drop. And as we look at measures of effectiveness, at first it was actually received like a win for the U.S. people received it and they thought like, I just got free fuel. There was like posts like, thank you, US, we just got free fuel. And as we saw that evolve over the next 24 hours was where they were actually going to try to redeem it. And it turned into this big US hoax of them like, they're liars, they're not keeping their promises.
The incompetence.
The incompetence of them. We forced them to actually, again, take some of their bandwidth from what they're trying to focus on the battlefield and have to focus on addressing that situation, getting their brigade PAO to release official statements saying it, getting the governor of the Moynick province to come out and have to release an official statement about it.
Oh, man.
So they're doing damage control at that point, and we're focusing on the next 24, right? What's our next goal?
And that leads into what I talked about earlier of being risk averse, right? Like, could we actually do this and accomplish the exact same effects in any combat operation that we do as the United States? Yes. Will we ever, because we are committed to the mission and we're committed to the desired end state? Part of me wants to lean to no because of that risk averse that we have as Americans.
All right. I'm going to ask my OCTs to chime in on if they got any thoughts, and then we're going to take a short pause after that.
No, so I thought it went really well. I mean, we've seen something similar in the past with food vouchers, right? But that would just be food vouchers by itself. What I thought you guys did a really good job, and kind of that, and it comes back together with the target working group and everybody being receptive and being a team and coming up with a plan that goes through all tribes, right? And how effective that was with, we hit the fuel depot. We had stuff that was prepped beforehand for the fuel depot. We're covering your exfil. We're covering your infill, right? And then on top of that, hey, here's some fake leaflets with the brigade symbol on it. We know you guys are already going to be hurting on fuel for at least the next 48, 72 hours. Now we're going to hurt you even more as a large portion of the population comes up and is trying to ask you guys for fuel. So it was a very well executed, well thought out plan rather than just, throwing something at a problem and hoping it sticks. There was numerous layers to it that took everybody coming together and formulating that plan as a whole. And it was done really, really well.
Yep. And then just going back to like Reaper's initial intent for you guys was just kind of like disrupt, right? So then that's exactly what you did, both, lethal, non-lethal there. Just being able to like push those fuel vouchers out and get the brigade to like spread their bandwidth across like their already limited bandwidth across and try to figure out, hey, now we have to like counter this. We have to let them know that those were fake fuel vouchers. It's not us. Like they're on their heels already. And then like Spencer said, now we're on to the next 24 while they're doing damage control back here. Like it's genius. And that's how you end up going from that 24 to 48 hours ahead mark, and you keep separating like that. And then they're playing checkers hardly and they're losing, while you guys are playing chess and just staying ahead of the game.
And who's to say too, right? Like even if, the brigade staff and the brigade commander are trying to be like, no, we're not giving out that fuel because we need that fuel and this is fake. Like, what's the chance that that private in that Bradley who has an a civilian coming up to him with his patch, a fuel voucher, and he's like, oh yeah, I guess it's legit, and he just hands it off. Like you can't manage that level of spin all the way down to the lowest level that quickly.
Thank you for listening. In this episode, we heard from Andrew, Mike, and Spencer as they illustrated how ARSOF and Conventional Force integrate by describing a very specific mission that they executed here at the National Training Center. In the next episode, Andrew, Mike, and Spencer tell us about a mission from their rotation with a special emphasis on civil affairs' ability to influence the local population.
Thank you for listening to Off the Radar, where ARSOF prepares for conflict. Like, subscribe, and share on your listening platform. Actions will determine the outcome.